Welcome to episode 47 of the Mental Dietitian Podcast. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. It's 2023. Holy shit. Man. Another year's gone. Another year is here. And this is the time of the year where people are bombarded with advice. So much advice. So much advice everywhere. And I heard an amazing podcast the other day. It was with Lewis Howes and James Clear. James Clear is one of my favorite people to listen to. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits, an amazing, amazing book about how to form habits. Has sold over 10 million copies. I think it's actually 20 million copies. I don't know, but it's sold a lot of copies for a reason. If you haven't read it, my advice is to go read it. But here's the thing, there's so much advice going around right now, and what they were talking about in this podcast, which I really wanted to dive into and share with you, is, and it's something that I've thought about for a long time, and they were able to put words to it really well, is that advice is very contextual. A lot of people will say, especially at this time of the year, the biggest thing in society at this time of the year is going to the gym. It's a big thing for a lot of people. Going to the gym, I want to lose a few pounds, or I want to put on some muscle, or I want to do this, I want to do that. And you'll be bombarded with diets. You're going to be bombarded with, you should be on a keto diet. You should be on a low carb diet. You should do intermittent fasting. You should do fasting for 3 days. You should just do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. And instead of seeking all this advice, and people get confused. They get really confused. You get analysis paralysis, information constipation, whatever you want to call it, especially when you start researching, especially when you start looking at stuff and all the marketing around SEO searches at the moment, where you start researching things, then your social media feed is blown up with sponsored ads by people giving you more advice, and you end up doing nothing. So what does Ahren think? What do I think? What does the Mental Dietitian podcast have to say about this? And I totally agree with Lewis Howes and James Clear in this perspective. Instead of seeking advice, ask yourself questions. Because when you ask yourself a question, the context can almost be very specific. It can basically disappear from the person who's giving you the advice, and it's strictly applied to you. So if you want to, whatever it is with your health goals, a question that you can ask yourself is, what would a healthy person do? That's going to be a different answer for every single person. And I talk about this all the time, your identity. Your identity, how do you shift it? I talked about it in the last podcast. If you want some really good nuggets, 3 things that I really sat down with and I spent a few days being like, you know what are 3 things? How can I help you that's listening to this? How can I teach you everything that I've learned about how to better oneself, and how can I boil it down and summarize it into 3 things that I think at the start of the year can really help? Go listen to that episode. It's a banger. I'm not blowing my own horn or whatever, smoking my own pipe. I don't know what. But it's a good one because I spent a lot of time researching and studying, and I ran it by a few people before I did the podcast, and they really liked it, and they got a lot of value from it. But the identity is like, okay, well, what would a healthy person do? And if your identity isn't tied to being a healthy person, you're like, well, what would a healthy person do? And they might stop doing this and start doing that. Start doing this and stop doing that. Whatever it may be, only you know that. And I love that perspective of like questions you can ask oneself instead of seeking advice from a million people, because it's going to be like a freaking fire hose of information. It's not going to be a little drip. It's going to be a fire hose. And that's the problem with making any changes in this internet age that we're in, and everything's listening to everything that we say on our phones and catering marketing around that to us specifically. So the problem is there's a fire hose of information when sometimes it's like, can we just have one piece of information and act on that? Which brings me to a second question, which is a really, really good question. Do I need to seek more information, or do I need to execute on the information I already have? Strategy versus execution. Most people in life are getting ready, aim, 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 and they never fire. They're constantly getting ready to get ready, planning to plan, to plan, to plan, and they never pull the trigger. So that question of, do I need to seek more information, or do I need to execute on the information I already have? Such a good question. Such a great question to ask yourself. Maybe you do need to strategize and plan more. But what I think most people need to do is they need to execute on the information that they already have. We live in the information age. It's called that for a reason. We have so much information and so little execution, but only you know the answer to that question. Don't let me tell you. Ask yourself that question. If you have goals around money, say you want to get out of debt, what would somebody who wants to get out of debt do today? What would somebody who wants to get out of debt do this week? What would a financially independent person do? Well, they probably wouldn't spend money eating out every day on fast food if you were trying to pay off debt. But if you were somebody who was really trying to optimize your time, maybe you would spend money buying food. It all depends on what you are looking for. And that's what is a really interesting perspective. Another question, which I kind of stole from James, he said, what am I optimizing towards right now? More money, more time, more peace? What are you optimizing towards right now? What is it? What is it for you? And I like the word optimizing because it doesn't feel like you're ever going to get there. Like, what's the goal I'm working towards right now? Well, once you achieve that goal, then what? But I like that turn of phrase, what am I optimizing towards? It feels like there's a constant honing. There's you can be optimizing constantly. You can optimize forever. You're constantly tinkering at your craft, whatever it may be. What am I optimizing towards right now? Another great question you can ask yourself. And then after you answer that question, you could ask yourself the question based on that person's identity of whatever you're optimizing towards. Say you're optimizing towards money, already mentioned that. Or what would somebody who has this certain amount of money, what kind of decisions would they make right now? And you probably get real quick answers really quick of what you should stop doing and what you should start doing. If you want more peace in your life and less anxiety, well, what would a person who has a lot of peace do if they spoke to me? Well, they might be like, hey, man, you should go do some therapy. Hey, man, you know that box you locked away about your childhood in the back of your mind? It's time to unpack that box. It's time to talk about it. And then you'll have more peace, whatever it may be. It's a great question. What am I optimizing towards? Here's a good one. Here is a really good one that I believe gives you your power back, because if your power and your life and your happiness and how you feel is tied to external things, you can never be free. You can never, ever, ever be free, because everything else around you controls how you feel. Here's a good one. Are you ready? How am I contributing to the reality I don't want? How am I contributing to the reality I don't want? And what this question does is it allows you to see, and I love this saying, I've heard Ed Milet say it, we create or allow everything in our life. People are like, oh, well, I didn't allow all this childhood trauma, all these things that affect me. No, you didn't. But events happen to you. You created a response to that event in the past, and now that response will come up in certain situations. And it can take the wheel of your life. And a response may be to that question of like, well, how am I contributing to the reality that I don't want? Well, I know that there's these things and I'm choosing not to look at them and I'm choosing not to deal with them because they are unpleasant and painful. That's how I'm contributing to the reality that I don't want. So it's like, okay, well, if I'm contributing to the reality that I don't want, that means that I now have the power based on my choices to choose to do things towards a reality that I do want. Then you have your power back. Your power isn't given to some external circumstances or somebody else. It's yours. You are the captain of your own ship. You're the captain of your own soul. You get to choose. Choice is your superpower. And one of the last questions I really wanted to leave you with, it's a good question to ask yourself. And all these questions I've got to ask myself. And then this one, this is a good one. And I hope it hits you the same way it hits me. Because I think the real epidemic, the real pandemic in this world is not enoughness. And what is underneath not enoughness? It's not loving oneself. So the last question I wanted to share with you before I let you go. If I truly loved myself, what would I do? It's a great question. And if you're facing a decision, whether or not it's to start a relationship, end a relationship, start a job, end a job, travel and go after your dreams or play safe. If I truly loved myself, what would I do right now? It's such an amazing question, and it really hits me because there's so many things I'm like, well, that particular environment, why would I do that? Like, I don't like being in that environment. There's a part of me that wants people to accept me or wants people to like me. And if I remove myself from certain environments and certain situations, I'm worried that I won't be included in the tribe anymore. And if I'm not included in the tribe, I'm a loner, and that's terrifying. I think everybody has felt that before, whether maybe being around people or how say things or act a certain way, which is not in congruency with who they really are. So if you truly loved yourself, what would you do? I wanted to end that there. I don't want to drone on. I don't want to sit here and waffle on and give you a bunch of advice about what I think you should do. But ask yourself some questions. And these are a good few questions to start your year with that can really help you and really guide you into making some good decisions and start going forward and creating systems in your life so that 2023 can be a better year, more peace, more feeling, more money, more abundance, more health, realistically, more love. That's what it really is. If you've got a bunch of money, you can love more. If you've got a great health, you can love life more and experience life more and the abundance of it all. It's really coming down to more love, more abundance, more peace, feeling it all. That's what I wish for you this year. That's what I wish for myself this year. So love you guys. I'm excited for the year. I'm excited to share this with more people, this message. And if you found this helpful, please share it with somebody. I really appreciate it. I want this show to blow up. I want to create a community. I want to create a movement of sharing this message and the message of all my guests to the world. And you can help me do that by sharing the show. Love you guys. We'll talk to you next week.